public schools. If those two words don't frighten you or repulse you, then they should keep watching, and hopefully they will by the end of this. If they already repulse you, well, keep watching anyway. There are too many two words in the English language that are worse than public schools. They're neither public nor schooling. Maybe democratic socialism. No matter what pretty little word you put in front of socialism, it's still socialism, which is the control of people's lives, the control of the economy, and eventually bread lines, and which, yeah, may be voted in at the beginning, like in Nazi Germany and other places, but it eventually leads to communism and fascism. So democratic socialism may be worse. There are some that are close to being as bad, maybe Ocasio-Cortez, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John McCain, Mitt Romney, a bunch of others, Robert De Niro, George Clooney. Anyway, repulsive individuals. But anyway, public schooling is not about the public, it's not about schooling. It's about stealing money from you and me, whether we like it or not, locally, and then forcing us to send our children, excuse me, got an itchy nose, allergies here in Georgia, forcing our children to go into these indoctrination camps, which is what they are. So it's not, and it's not the public that's educating the children. It's public taxes, citizens' taxes. It's the government in charge of propagandizing our children, indoctrinating them. And what I mean by indoctrination, it has the word doctrine pretty much in there in the middle. It's about spreading doctrines, and it's a pejorative, it's a negative term. So for instance, you wouldn't say if there's a class on honesty and people are being taught what honesty is, honesty with other people, honesty in your relationships, honesty with yourself, honesty in your exchanges, in your business and everything else, that would not be called indoctrination. That wouldn't be an indoctrination class. That would be an instruction class, instructing people on what honesty is. Same thing with like a real estate class on owning a home. Teach you how to negotiate, teach you about loans, about getting your credit score up, about how to find the best realtor, the best property. So that's a class. It's an instructive class on how to get a good home and get it at the right price. So it's not an indoctrination class. Indoctrination is about teaching irrational philosophy, irrational ideologies, biased ideologies, ideologies that are not set in reality. And that's what public schools, I'll continue to use that term, but they're not schools, they're indoctrination camps. But for the sake of this video, I'll go ahead and call them public schools. Public schools are about indoctrination on many subjects, on government, past government, history, environmentalism, capitalism, who Democrats and Republicans are, literature, and even math. They've even corrupted math. I didn't think that was possible. But so the indoctrination is about confusion and setting somebody, confusion meaning confusing kids so that they really don't know what's right and wrong. They've got a sense, sort of this anxiety that something's being taught to them that isn't right, but they really don't know how to be objective about it. Especially if they don't have objective parents at home, and they probably don't if the parents, frankly, are sending them to the indoctrination camps. So public schools didn't start out this way. I mean, public schools are wrong, and I'll talk about that at the end. I mean, they're just wrong morally. It's wrong to compel parents and kids to compel them to do things they don't want to do. But the early schooling was actually not too bad. There were short classes. They actually instructed on how to read, how to write, a little bit of basic history, and they actually dealt with valuable literature like Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Alexander Dumas, and others. And so the kids were actually exposed, and the classics also, So the kids were actually exposed in England and America and some other places to some pretty decent schooling, whether they wanted to be there or not, and most of them didn't want to be there. Kids don't like to be told what to do. I didn't, still don't. So the early schools weren't so bad, but with the philosophy of Horace Mann and others in the 19th century, there started to be compulsion to go to school. In the early 1900s in America, it became mandatory in all 50 states. Parents were required to send their kids to public schools. So that's been going on for 100 years. And it started out with a little bit of socialist, leftist ideology. It really ramped up in the 60s, ramped up further with PC ideology and environmentalist ideology sort of tacked on to the leftist ideology. And now what we have in modern public schools is really just complete leftist ideology. They've taken over the schools. They are a cesspool, a breeding ground for that ideology, indoctrination. And so kids' minds are getting warped and stupefied, and we see it in the streets with Antifa, which is a fascist organization. Ironically, calls itself anti-fascist, Antifa, but it's a fascist organization that wants authoritarian control and wants to stifle free speech. That's exactly what Hitler did, and others like him, Mussolini, Stalin. So that these Antifa young adults don't come out of nowhere. They're not brought from a spaceship and plopped on planet Earth and start getting into the streets with their faces covered, embarrassingly, so that nobody can identify these idiots and these scoundrels. They don't come from space. They come from public schools. They're bred there. These public school teachers and administrators, government is proud of these people. It's one reason why they don't stop them. And it's one reason why some mayors actually help them. They're happy about these people being in the streets. The same thing for the environmentalist movement, the Bernie Sanders movement. I'm not sure I mentioned his name a while ago. That should have been one of the names. The Bernie Sanders movement, Ocasio-Cortez, obviously, the Green Deal. There's only one good Green Deal in America. That's the greenbacks. That's money. Greenbacks aren't good, but money is good. So anyway, these classes are teaching horrible things, and they're teaching that gender is fluid. It's not. There are two genders. Yeah, I guess you could transgender over to another one, but if you did it fully, well, then I guess that you would be that gender, but you would still have the hormones of your previous gender, unless you took a bunch of drugs, and then I guess you might be fully, who knows. But there are only two genders, male and female. But that's not what the schools teach, and they expel students who say otherwise, especially if they speak otherwise. And then you have Common Core math, where they come up with these long sort of little tricks on math instead of just teaching math. And so again, the students' minds are stupefied. What the hell? I mean, can't you just add? Can't you just subtract? Can't you just do long division, divide? It's not that hard, but it's make work for students or for teachers. I mean, you don't need 9 months to teach math. My daughter learned it in a week or two. She learned percentages by going to the grocery store with me and to restaurants with me, asking what a tip was, and I explained percentages to her, and within a year, she was doing the tips for me and telling me how much I should tip. And I always put on there, pretty much, I think, what she told me. But math doesn't have to be taught in schools, and certainly Common Core math is just, it's a falsification of that. So with math, even they've done it. They've called our U.S. founders slaveholders, which most of them were, but they failed to mention that the ideology of our founders was mostly individual rights. So their ideas were right. They just didn't follow them, and they should be criticized for that. But it has to be put into the context of individual rights, which schools don't do. So I've come across these kids who come out and say Thomas Jefferson was horrible. No, he wasn't. He was horrible he was actually really good, if you want to put it that way, with his slaves. He was a horrible person in the sense that he had slaves, but his ideas were not horrible. It needs to be put in that kind of context. And with environmentalism, putting the earth above individuals, above human beings, worrying about the climate. Frankly, the climate, as I've said before, needs to be warmer so more people are not dying, and so more vegetation grows. But it's not, the earth isn't suffering. The earth has been through 3 glaciations. The entire earth froze. It's been through 5 different major extinctions and come back with more animals. The earth is fine, thank you very much. Environmentalism is simply a way for teachers to gain control over the minds of their kids so that the kids are obedient towards the demands of government. The government's running these schools, by the way, again. So environmentalism is fake. And on capitalism, I mean, these teachers are totally against capitalism, talking about the rich and poor, the income divide, economic disparity. The reason there's economic disparity in a free market is because some people work harder than other people. Some people get more educated than other people. Some people are lazy. Some people are not. I'm not a rich guy, don't really have that much money. There's tens of millions of people who have more money than me. Good on them. And frankly, I don't care how much money they have. If they're a billionaire, good on them. I would love to be a billionaire. But Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, and others, they want to steal the money of billionaires who made their money honestly by providing you and I good products. That's not what's taught in schools. It's taught that these people have power. Billionaires have power. Millionaires have power. They don't have power. Only government has power over you and me. There's a bunch of other things I want to get into, but I've got to get under the 15-minute limit. But one thing this really comes down to is morality and individual rights. The individual is the only one who has rights. That includes kids. Government does not have a right to determine content that goes into kids' minds, and it certainly doesn't have the right to force kids into those content environments, schools, public schools. And it also does not have the right, doesn't have any rights, it only has prerogatives that we give it, to force us adults to pay for the cesspools of these indoctrination camps. So we've got to put an end to this. We've got to put an end to so-called public schooling, get rid of these concentration camps completely, wipe them out, and get schooling back into private hands, where kids like my almost 16-year-old daughter made a decision several times. She wanted to go and have some private classes at a little homeschool co-op, and she still does it. And it's her decision. I pay for it. And that's the way it's supposed to be. No coercion, no compulsion, and no indoctrination camps. Just free kids learning at their own speed what they need to learn in life to get by and to prosper in life. And as parents, being proud of them and happy that the government is not stealing our money to pay for something that is so disgusting and so harmful, inimical to freedom in America. Thanks for watching.